What if Yoda became Supreme Chancellor? In the past, it was normal for Jedi to become Chancellor, most notably during the era of the Army of Light versus the Brotherhood of Darkness. But this tradition was lost in the days of the High Republic, as the Jedi became more in service of the Senate rather than leading it. However, what if this changed during the last days of the Republic, and Yoda became Supreme Chancellor? Let's start this story during the time of the Phantom Menace. Padme Amidala of Naboo has just called for a vote of no confidence in Chancellor Valorum, and in a few days, the Senate will vote on a new Chancellor. In the meantime, the Senate is taking nominations for who should take his place. The Jedi Council are in session and discuss these events. They can all sense that this election will be very significant and consequential for the Republic. Events are changing. The darkness in the Force is rising, and Qui-Gon Jinn has supposedly brought the prophesized Chosen One who will bring balance to the Force. The Jedi need a strong and powerful leader, one free of corruption who genuinely wants the best for the Republic. At the next Senate session, nominations come through. Bail Antilles of Alderaan, Ainley Team of Malastare, Sheev Palpatine of Naboo, and finally Windu releases his card and takes center stage, nominating Grandmaster Yoda for the position of Chancellor. He continues on saying, through his hundreds of years of experience, there is no one better. At this point in time, the Jedi were highly respected and not hated like they were during the Clone War. The Senate was shocked by this. A Jedi hadn't been Chancellor for almost 1,000 years. Why change this now? This was discussed all throughout the HoloNet the next day, and the reception was fairly positive. At this point in the timeline, the Jedi were loved around the galaxy, and Yoda was famous. He'd been the Grand Master for hundreds of years, and everyone knew about his wisdom. However, two people didn't like this: Darth Plagueis and Sidious. Plagueis couldn't believe Yoda had been nominated as Chancellor. He hadn't taken this into account for his future plans. He thought against the other senators, Palpatine would surely win. However, against Yoda he might struggle. Meanwhile, whilst this was happening, Obi-Wan and Qui-Gon were sent to Naboo with Queen Amidala as the two engaged the Sith Darth Maul in combat. However, the outcome is the same. Qui-Gon is cut down first, and Obi-Wan gets his revenge against Maul. At the same time across the galaxy, the Senate vote for whom they want to be Chancellor, and the winner is announced. It was a tight race between first and second, but Grandmaster Yoda has won, and there will be a new Chancellor of the Republic. Chairs are cast out through the Senate, and Yoda is sworn into the position. With this, he'll have to step down as Grand Master of the Jedi Order, and in his place, Mace Windu took over the position, but Yoda will still hold a seat on the council. Palpatine and Plagueis were furious with this. Their plans bet on Palpatine becoming Chancellor. In the original timeline, Palpatine killed Plagueis the day before he became Chancellor because the dark side told him to. However, in this timeline, because his chancellorship was not assured, he never attacked his master. This completely ruined their plans. They think about whether they should wait 8 more years until Yoda's terms are up and go for the chancellorship again. However, Plagueis reaches out with the Force and can tell the future is clouded and doesn't know if they should take the risk. No doubt Yoda will be well received as Chancellor, and there's a high chance another Jedi will replace him when the time comes. They decide to change their plan entirely. Plagueis aka Hago Damask will sit on the Separatist Council directly and lead the Separatists to victory and take over the Republic by force. But Palpatine will remain in the Senate for now, making Yoda's chancellorship as difficult as possible, stirring up as much trouble as he can, whilst elevating his own position, gunning for the position of Chancellor after Yoda's 8 years have concluded. The Sith begin implementing their separatist plan. They use the influence with the Trade Federation, Corporate Alliance, and Techno Union to sow division and dissatisfaction with the Republic's leadership. They subtly manipulate these organizations to create a pretext for a separatist movement. Yoda begins his chancellorship and starts making changes to the Republic. He started with implementing a firm stance on corruption in the Senate, something that was a very evident problem that everyone knew needed to be fixed. He passed through a bill that capped the salary that a senator could receive, and to be a senator required one's banking records to be tracked for evidence of bribes and coercion. Yoda put forth the Republic Expansionary Decree that encouraged the expansion of the Republic into the Outer Rim territories and other territories that were not part of the Republic. The Jedi spearheaded this and were used as diplomats to bring new worlds into the Republic. Meanwhile, during this time, Palpatine attempted to increase his standing in the Senate, looking to take the place of Yoda after his 2 terms concluded. He would need to get into power before the war began to claim emergency powers. In the original timeline, between the Phantom Menace and Attack of the Clones, many worlds seceded from the Republic. This was for a few reasons, but mainly smaller worlds felt that their voices and issues were not being heard in the Senate. But in this timeline, with Yoda as Chancellor, this was not the case. Yoda realized that this would become a greater issue, and set up the Planetary Resolution Committee, which allowed smaller worlds with less than 10 billion in population to voice their issues in a smaller session, which may not be appropriate at the main Senate meeting. And if this was found to be of great significance, it would be brought up to the entirety of the Senate's attention. But if not, a solution would be found through the smaller committee's intervention, assisted with the help of the Jedi. Ultimately, with Yoda as Chancellor, the Jedi were significantly involved with the Senate's affairs from a political view. But the difference is that Yoda was Chancellor, so the political decisions were being driven by the Jedi instead of a Chancellor who only thinks of himself. Palpatine did what he could to maintain the corruption that the Sith had attempted to foster in the Senate, but Yoda's reformations were working, and he was somewhat limited. But Plagueis, on the other hand, continued to foster discontent in the Outer Rim with trade disputes, hyperspace issues, and many more. He used his financial backing to bribe worlds to reject the Republic's proposition of expansion. However, eventually the Republic's expansion reached the world the Sith tried to keep hidden. The Jedi landed down on Kamino, where the Jedi find the clone army and learn of its production and order by Sifo Dyas 8 years ago. This news is brought back to Yoda in the Senate, and Yoda details that Master Dyas was never authorized to do this, and did it on his own accord. Plagueis and Palpatine know that with the clone army's discovery, if they want to thrust the galaxy into war, they must attack now, and they declare the formation of the Confederacy of Independent Systems, with over 2,000 worlds under their command, and declare war on the Republic. They preferably would have waited a few more years to garner more support, but they know they can use the conflict to potentially gain more support for Palpatine in the Senate. It's Yoda's 8th year in the Senate, and the new Chancellor will be elected soon. War breaks out around the galaxy, and Yoda proposes to the Senate to vote for the acceptance of the clone army. This was not a decision he wanted to make on his own, but leaves it up to the Senate. However, with the threat of the Separatists looming, the Senate vote in favor of the clone army, and a full-scale clone war breaks out with the Jedi leading the army. Palpatine instantly speaks out against the war in the Senate, blaming the Jedi and Yoda specifically for his intervention in the Outer Rim causing this. However, he doesn't gain much traction in the Senate, as Yoda's popularity over the last couple of years has been the greatest out of any Chancellor in the last century. Palpatine continues to stir anti-Jedi sentiment, attempting to position himself as the savior for the Republic after Yoda's term ends. Plagueis and Dooku command the Separatist forces, and the ultimate plan is to turn the Republic against the Jedi. The war goes on for a year, and Anakin and Obi-Wan were prominent figures in the war, and the time came when Yoda's second term was up, and he was forced to step down as Chancellor. It was time for a new Chancellor to be elected. Palpatine had worked hard over the last 8 years to increase his standings and pull down the Jedi as much as he could, and push for his campaign, attempting to blame the war on the Jedi. But this was not successful. The Republic had flourished over the last 8 years due to Yoda, and thus the Senate favored another Jedi instead, Mace Windu as Chancellor. Palpatine and Plagueis realize there is no hope for his chancellorship now, and decides to defect to the Separatist Council to join Dooku and Plagueis. Now in this timeline, there is no subtle manipulation and sabotaging of the Clone War by Palpatine because he isn't Chancellor. There would be less major defeats and occasional setbacks engineered by Palpatine to prolong the war. The Republic and Jedi would focus solely on winning, but the Separatists and Sith would also do the same. The war would only last a year in this timeline. The Separatist army was just as strong in this timeline, but generally had weaker support due to Yoda and Mace being so popular. Even though the war had thrust the galaxy into chaos, support for the Jedi remained, as the Republic could see they were working tirelessly to win and defeat the Separatists. Mace would broadcast the continued efforts to reach a diplomatic solution to the war, and offered endless treaties and ceasefires to discuss how to end the war with the Separatists, but this was constantly rejected. The war would ultimately climax on the planet Kamino. Plagueis and Dooku attacked the planet with their forces, attempting to take out the heart of the clone army. Once knowledge of this reached Coruscant, the Jedi Council was mobilized. Yoda, Plo Koon, Agen Kola, Obi-Wan, and others with Anakin were sent to the planet. The storm cloud swirled above Kamino, cracking with the tension of the impending conflict. The Republic's elite forces, led by the Jedi, were already mobilized as the Separatist forces drew closer. The fate of the clone army and Republic hinged on this battle. The Jedi land on the surface of Kamino as the distant rumble of battle echoed across the facility, where the Jedi had already deployed clone troopers in preparation for the Separatist assault. Yoda led the charge towards the heart of the battle, as the other council members tailored beside him. The Separatists had already begun their push. Battle droids poured forward as blaster fire soared past their ears. Anakin charged ahead, cutting down 10 droids every second, as Obi-Wan followed close behind, deflecting blaster fire back towards the onslaught. The battle quickly intensified, as the Separatist forces began their bombardment, led by the Invisible Hand. The Jedi split into two groups, as they made their way towards their designated opponents, Plagueis and Dooku. The Sith Lords landed on the surface, their dark forms easily recognizable. Plagueis stood tall, and Yoda wasted no time, accompanied by Plo Koon and Agen Kola, meeting him in the center of the battlefield. Their blades clashed with such forces that the sound was louder than the thunderous lightning of the storm. The intensity of the duel was unlike anything the Jedi had faced before, with Plagueis using the dark side of the Force to augment his speed and strength. But the Jedi held their ground, not giving Plagueis an inch. Meanwhile, Anakin, Obi-Wan and Kit Fisto fought Dooku. Dooku regarded them with the cold, calculated eyes of a former Jedi Master, and the four of them moved like fluid shadows, exchanging quick strikes and evasion. Plagueis was relentless, every move steeped in the dark side, but the Jedi didn't give up. Yoda had the first small victory, slicing one of Plagueis' blades in half, as Kola pushed him back against the concrete wall. Slightly dazed, it took Plagueis a second to catch his balance, but Plo Koon was already upon him, going for the killing strike. They locked blades, and from the side came Yoda. Plagueis attempted to cast him with lightning, but the former Chancellor was too fast, and he thrust his blade through Plagueis' chest, killing him. Dooku's ferocity only grew as the battle raged. However, his age was getting the better of him. He was slowing, whereas Anakin's youth was his ally. He kicked Dooku to the ground, and used his force power to steal his lightsaber from his grasp, leaving the Sith defenseless, and ultimately they arrested the leader of the Separatists. The Separatist forces now began to falter, as the remaining droids and commanders were overwhelmed by the Jedi and their clone trooper allies. The battle had been won. This was a decisive victory, and they contacted Chancellor Windu to report this, but he mobilized the Jedi again, saying this is the perfect opportunity to launch a counterattack on Geonosis, and mobilizes the rest of the council to group up with them to destroy the droid factories in the heart of the Confederacy. The Republic forces arrive on Geonosis, and the final battle of the Clone War begins. The Republic forces quickly overwhelm the Separatist defenses, and begin bombarding the droid factories, destroying them. The council go to the surface to find and arrest the Separatist council, but they find one ship attempting to escape, but the Republic forces shoot it down, and the council go to investigate. But when they got to the wreckage, what they found shocked them. Senator Palpatine brandishing a red lightsaber as he rushed towards the council. They were caught off guard, but had enough time to defend and counterattack. There were 7 of them, and only one Palpatine, and thus they stole his lightsaber off him, and put Palpatine in handcuffs, and took him back to Coruscant. On the way back from Geonosis, they went to Raxus Secundus, and travelled to the Separatist Senate to declare the Republic victory, and orders for all droid production to stop around the galaxy, and they have no choice but to do this. Over the following week, surrender treaties are presented and signed, and with that the war was officially over. The Republic was consumed by joy at the fact, and the image of the Jedi in the eyes of the people had never been greater. The Republic, led by Master Yoda, then Windu, had led the Republic to victory, with the Jedi generals in the front lines, fighting with all their might. With this, a chain of Jedi Supreme Chancellors had begun, and it's hard to see how any politician would be elected to the position anytime soon. The Jedi had made good change, expanded the Republic, and ensured every world had a voice in the vast Republic. With this, the Republic would enter a new High Republic era, with the Sith defeated once and for all. Hey guys, check out our sale over at Fantasy Sabers, where for the entirety of April with every order, we're giving away a free mystery saber. We offer the best NeoPixel sabers on the market. There's never been a better time to grab one for yourself and fulfill your Star Wars dreams.